Yo, what's happening, crew? What's up, crew? That sounds no more or less ignorant than the other. Again, forgive my lack of objectivity. Speaking of which, there is a lie in academics in our country. And that lie is that you're either a pure scientist or you're an applied scientist. And that, I'll tell you what, that's a false dichotomy. You can be a good scientist and still try to improve this world, can't you? If not, I quit. I absolutely quit. So we take everyday objects of hatred and intolerance, and we try to teach tolerance. And you know, it's amazing to me. I have so many people say, yeah, but what you're really doing is building a shrine to racism. That's not true. Give me 20 minutes and I'll show you how it's not true. You know, if you take a textbook that deals with the Jim Crow era, this era of segregation in our society from the late 1870s to the mid-1960s, there are pictures in the book about Jim Crow signs. All I'm doing is showing you the actual sign. And it's a powerful teaching tool. This will be, when we move into the new facility, you'll first walk in, we're going to tell you who Jim Crow was. We're going to explain to you that Jim Crow was at first a slur, and then it was a minstrel character. By the way, during that Jim Crow period, we had sort of the advent of blackface performances. Everybody familiar with blackface? Once we get through with that, we're going to take you into the belly of the place and show you the relationship between Jim Crow and violence. There is a sad but true reality, and that is Jim Crow segregation could not have worked in the United States without violence, or the threat of violence. It would not have worked. That's a part of the ugly truth. I have people again who say to me, why do you have to, if you're going to study history, why do you have to study that part of history? Man, that's so intellectually immature. Is that person really suggesting that we only study the parts of history that are happy? That history is two people running on a beach in slow motion with their hair bouncing in some Miss Clairol commercial? The reality is there was a lot of good things in American history, and there were some bad ones. We're going to show the relationship between Jim Crow segregation and material objects. Now here's a good question. What does a Mammy cookie jar have to do with blacks not being allowed to vote? What does a Sambo ashtray have to do with blacks not being allowed to live in certain neighborhoods? Well, the answer is this. All those objects served as three-dimensional propaganda to support those policies and practices. They were the material evidence of the attitudes that undergirded the policies. Does that make sense? Good. Going to tell the story of Little Black Sambo. How many of you remember Little Black Sambo? Anybody? Wow, that's amazing. I have to tell you this, you don't know me very well. My mind tends to go in all these different places. Just go with me. Here in Grand Rapids, I think a couple years ago, there was a teacher that got into some trouble because, I think it was a she, was it a she? Who had a story, what's it called, The Telephone Man or something like that? And in the story was the word nigger. And because one of the characters was kind of, you know, not unconsciously, but subconsciously, ignorantly racist, and didn't realize it. And the teacher got in trouble. Now you see, everybody involved in that situation should have come to the museum. Everybody involved in that. The teacher shouldn't have gotten in trouble for that. The only thing the teacher probably could have done better was to prepare the people for it. But we have to talk openly and honestly about things like Little Black Sambo and all other kind of depictions and the like. But you know, this is the thing we're going to do in the new museum we can't do now because we don't have the space. We're also going to talk about how blacks were not passive victims, but instead fought against the images, one way through civil rights, but also through their art, through the music, through their songs and the like. And then the most important piece of this, and I'll move on, we're going to create a space where we have this mural, this beautiful mural of black people and white people and red people and yellow people who have died for civil rights. And this cloud of witnesses, to use a biblical phrase, they are going to be the backdrop as we talk about where do we need to go today and look at organizations and individuals who are devoting their lives. And you know who's going to benefit the most from that? Me. Me. Because when you spend as much time as I do researching hatred on the web, you need to find a place where folks are doing better. How many of you are familiar with the rapper Fabulous? The reason I quote him is because I often quote H. Ross Perot, which I know makes me the only sociologist in America who quotes H. Ross Perot. Bless his capitalist heart. I would like to see things stop. I would like to see us mature as a nation and get to the point where these things, they seem childish to us, but the reality is they don't stop, and they won't stop. So let's look at what's going on today. By the way, this is a 10 from the 1920s. Get a good look at it. A lot of times advertising pieces were racist. The same way we use sex to sell objects today, we used to use race. And so you'd stick an image of a black person, a caricature, disfigured image of a black person, and then you'd sell something like ice cream. Now, got that image burned in your heads? Now let me look at an image from today from one of our computer games. See, if you're going to be racist, you should be creative. Don't plagiarize. Yeah, you got to invest in your hobbies. How many of you like Dave Chappelle? Yeah, of course you do. He's funny. And I'll tell you what, in some instances, brilliant. That satire with the black Klansman, man, that was deep. I mean, that was so deep, my head almost exploded, if you remember the skit. But when he does the skit of the crack addict, he looks like he's just perpetuating stereotypes. You know, the problem with satire is, if your audience isn't where you are, you're just extending the thing you're satirizing, right? Yeah. And there are a lot of people in our country claim to be satirists, and they're really just getting paid. They're really just getting paid. This is a mask, a Halloween mask. You could have purchased this last year at Halloween USA. Every year, Halloween masks take the features of peoples of color and exaggerate them and make them monstrous simply by exaggerating them. I have a heartbreaking story I'll tell you later. We are now glorifying pimp culture in our society. I'll give you a little history lesson. African Americans in the 1960s had grown tired of mammy images and Tom images and Sambo images and pickaninny images. And with Sweet Sweet Badass Song, which was the first blaxploitation movie in 1971, I think, they were presented with a new set of stereotypical images, but preferable. And so you had them almost pathetically exchanging one set of stereotypes for a new set. So instead of having this asexual, humble, I'll be going home now, boss, instead of having that foolishness, instead they accepted the pimp and the whore, the drug user, the gangbanger. It's interesting, it's rare in history, even recent history, when you can point to a single thing as being so critical. And we are now glorifying, for many Americans, let me go back to this for a second. For many Americans, so-called pimp culture has become a synonym for African American culture. And that is a shame and an insult to every African American. First of all, it's not, pimp culture is not even a synonym for poor black people. But we have now taken this image, perpetuated through hip-hop songs, movies, and other medium. And we have taken this to mean that to be black, to be authentically black in our culture, means to be ignorant, means to be anti-authority, means to be chauvinistic, sexist, means to be hateful and full of hate. And I tell you what, W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington and Marcus Garvey and every unnamed black person marching in the civil rights movement has got to be turning over in their graves.